We have Heath from Canada. Heath, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hi there. Just kind of since you brought up the subject of hell, I kind of wanted to tell you as an atheist, kind of like, it's something that happened to me on my first day at school. And this was like before actual school. It was like summer school. I was 4 years old. And so this is like, except for a few concerts my parents took me to, my first experience was being with a bunch of other kids other than my family. And the first kid I talked to was this other 4-year-old little girl. And she came up to me, and the first thing she said to me and my brother were, God is always watching us, you know? And we were like, oh, well, God's not real. There's no such thing. And then she wandered off, and a couple of minutes later, her mom came up to us and started screaming at us. And I remember distinctly what she said. She said, you've got a black heart and you're going to hell. And to a 4-year-old kid, you know? And I remember my exact thought at the time, because I have a kind of reactionary memory. I remember my reactions to things, and then the rest comes. And my reaction was, oh, this poor kid. Like, what a terrible parent. I felt so bad for that kid. I didn't feel like I had a black heart and was going to hell. I knew I didn't have a black heart because we only watched documentaries in my house. We watched no commercial television, just PBS.
That's right. Like
I
the
watched
good
a lot
Lord
of science
intended.
documentaries. I knew my heart was.
Of course. Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah. And I didn't believe in hell. So my reaction was, oh, this poor kid. You know, what a terrible parent, you know. And it's just kind of a thought for people who think that they get their morality from Christianity. And I remember when I was a little older, 7 years old or 8 years old, I wanted to join Boy Scouts because my entire social group would go on Wednesday nights to Boy Scouts. And so I saved up my allowance for, I think, 2 months in order to be able to buy the little scarf and the shirts so that I could go. And on my first day, we went and did the stuff. My dad was a boat builder, so the knot tying and stuff I already knew. I kind of got to be a hero there. But at the end of the day, he was like, okay, now we're all going to pray to God. And I was like, for reasons, I had already gone through whether or not I believed in God, and I didn't. And I was like, well, no, that's dishonest. That's lying. So I'm not going to do it. And they kicked me out at that point. It was like one day Boy Scouts have to save up for 2 months to buy the stuff. And they wouldn't let me back in because I refused to. What I thought of at the time was lying. You know?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize this, but as an Eagle Scout myself, I can tell you. And first of all, by the way, it's handkerchiefs. It is not scarves. You'll get roasted by Boy Scouts, but being roasted by a Boy Scout isn't that big of a deal. But yeah, Boy Scouts of America is a Christian organization started by a very Christian man, Lord Baden-Powell, and the United States definitely took on a Christian identity. There are several religious specific awards you can get within the Boy Scouts. So when a lot of people hear that, I guess they get surprised because, I don't know, most people see it as pretty secular, but no, it's an explicitly Christian org for sure. So yeah, that doesn't surprise me that they might take offense to your lack of belief there.
I'm just really glad that at the age of 4...
Go ahead, Llana.
I'm just really glad that at the age of 4, you had the confidence and the sense of self that you were able to not take that woman's comment to heart, and that you also had the empathy to feel for her daughter. That's a testament to that your parents were doing something right with you.
I agree.
Oh, well, thank you. And I think it would just be a testament to you don't need religion to get moral as well. Like, I remember the Boy Scout leader saying to me, well, just pretend to pray. You can just pretend. And I was like, that's a lie. I'm not going to be dishonest. Because I'd gone through this thing where something had come up in the news. My mother had said, something had come up about religion. And I remember saying to my mom, well, that wouldn't happen to our family. We're all atheists. And she said, well, your dad isn't. And I was like, what? It's like, well, no, he was raised as a Christian and he still kind of believes. I mean, we don't push it on you guys, but he's a theist. We didn't use the phrase theist back then. And I thought, well, that's 5 against 1. That's not very cool. I'm going to become a theist. And I tried for 2 weeks. I tried really, really hard to believe in God, and I just couldn't do it because I don't believe in magic, and that was a benchmark for me. You have to believe in magic first, you know. And you know, you hear a story about something true that happens, and you hear a fairy tale, and they have a very different structure. And to me, everything I heard from the Bible was the fairy tale structure. You don't believe that stuff. It's got a very obvious, you know, made upness to it. So I guess my final question for you guys is that about a year ago, I was listening to a podcast about science and technology and about what it would take to get humans out into the galaxy. And I realized what would actually convince me that God was real. And my first reaction to that was, wow, I'm being completely unreasonable, or am I? Like, and so I want to get your opinion. Like, I thought if every time we looked at a new sun, there was a habitable planet around it, perfect for humans, that is so unlikely that would probably convince me that God existed. But that's already not the case. And my next thought was like, am I being an unreasonable prick? I mean, is this irrational, you know? So what do you guys think about that?
Let me try to understand your hypothetical. You're saying if it were true that every time we looked at a new star outside of our solar system and we found a habitable planet, not necessarily a lived on planet, but a habitable planet, that would increase your likelihood in the existence of God being real. Is that right?
Yeah, because even a super powerful alien race, because of the constraints of the speed of light and how much energy it would take, it's kind of unreasonable to think that could be done by anything other than basically magic. You know?
Yeah. I could see that. I
think that would, yeah.
But at that point, wouldn't the aliens be a more reasonable explanation? Because at least there's some naturalism going on there, right? Like if we exist, I still don't understand under naturalism why there couldn't be other life forms doing stuff, right?
Yeah, aliens are pretty unlikely because you would see a kind of wave of them moving through the universe. You would still see planets they hadn't yet reached and stuff like that.
Maybe.
And if the aliens were able to just go to every point in the universe at once and create a habitable planet that's perfect for us, at that point, I'm willing to say that God's at least equally likely.
Maybe,
you know,
but that is literally the plot of Neon Genesis Evangelion. So I don't know. That could be a possibility. I don't know. This is a big hypothetical. I think like the fact that we don't see that, right, is maybe more of a testament to that, you know, God not being a thing. Maybe if that was the case, I would say to be reasonable, I think it could perhaps increase the likelihood of a creator that creates the universe that is like, you know, maybe is interested in life being formed. Sure, maybe it increases the likelihood. But when it comes to the whole God part, right, because God is a very specific word with very specific connotations for a lot of people, I don't think it increases the Christian God in the slightest, for sure, or the Jewish God, or, you know, any of the Abrahamic understandings of God. I think it would have to be a kind of different God in general. The Christian God is particularly interested in the Jewish people, for one, and then, you know, eventually Christianity, and then I guess Muslims too, eventually then. You know, so other beings on other planets, that wasn't really in the realm of at least humans' understanding of what God wanted. So it had to be either a very different understanding of what the Christian God is, or just a different kind of God altogether. So I don't know. I guess that's the best answer I can come up with for your hypothetical there. But I want to hear Llana's take.
Well, what I'm hearing is that the caller, I'm sorry, I forget your name, is trying to come up with a scenario that is, in his mind, inexplicable by science.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And different people with different understandings of science could come up with something like similar. I mean, you could say, oh my God, if I got a pizza that just came out of the oven with symmetrical little pieces of cheese that all looked like Jesus, that might prove that God, that proves to me that God exists. And
well,
we would find a lot of rational reasons for that. The baker did it, whatever. But I think probably we all have some threshold where if there was something really miraculous that couldn't be explained otherwise, then you do turn to God or you turn to a religious explanation. But as Dan said, that's not the universe that we're living in. We don't have habitable planets in every
That's kind of my point. So am I being unreasonable? Because this is already not the case. We already know that this isn't a thing, So when I say this is my criteria, it's like my criteria would be if 2 + 2 = 3, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Real. So
I get what you're trying to say. I don't think I was getting it before, but I'm getting what you're saying now. You're saying, is it unreasonable for this to be my drawing line, right? For like whether God can be real. And I would say, I think I could come up with some better ideas for reasonable beliefs. No, I would say reasonable reasons, I guess, why a God could be real. I think you can come up with some better ones. I'll give you some examples right now. If there was a God who very clearly gave his intent and did it through a press conference so that like multiple people, verified journalists, for example, could like do interviews with and collect statements from, and we could like look at different news sources and see, oh yeah, this person definitely said this thing because this source got this source got. I mean, I don't think that's that unreasonable. A lot of people will scoff at that and say, well, God can't do that. And I say, well, why not? Seems like it works for everybody else on earth. I don't know why, Jesus couldn't come out and give like a press statement or something. I think that would make things more clear. I think if a God came out and just talked to people, just made his intent clear. For some Christians, that's too unreasonable, but I don't think that's unreasonable. I think that if I'm a creator of a people and I want them to worship me and have this great relationship with me, I think you got to talk to them every once in a while, right? So I don't know. That would be my sort of line to draw. If God could just do that, that'd be great. But anything beyond that, I'm going to be skeptical a little bit. But I don't know, Llana, what do you think?
There's a long history of using miracles to prove that somebody is God. It goes back to Exodus when Moses is talking to Pharaoh and he does all these things. He, turns the rod into snakes and things like that. And Pharaoh's magicians copy part of it. And so I think we all kind of look to that, but there's so far nothing that has really been definitive.
Yeah. But if you were posed with the question, right? If somebody's asking, what would it take for you to believe in God? What would you answer to that?
I would need to see some kind of miracle that was completely inexplicable, and that was not inexplicable because we didn't understand the science of it yet. I mean, there are things that are inexplicable with quantum physics and with the way the universe works that are still being researched. So just because we don't understand it doesn't mean it's God. But if it were something, if somebody came back from the dead and they were really truly that person and they were standing there talking to me, that would be that would shake the way I thought.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it would shake the way I would think too. Yeah. So I don't know. That's the thing, Heath, because like when you're talking to somebody who thinks you're the one being unreasonable, I would just say, hey, look at these stories that say that would happen. Why can't they happen to me? Right. I just think that that's a reasonable way to look at it. I have not had a miracle happen to me. I've heard stories of miracles, but that's about it. So maybe a miracle would change the needle, but overall, It's got to be something more than just, well, it's because the book says so, right? Which is what I think a lot of people rely on. But Heath, what do you think?
Yeah. I couldn't think of a miracle that wouldn't convince me. You make me think of The Prestige, like the book where someone actually does come back from the dead, and it turns out that it's actually his twin brother, and his other brother was killed, but they have been living as the same person for so long that they've lost all sense of their own identity. And they just both live as the same person because they've been doing it every day for decades, and they've just lost any individuality, right? And that would be a rational way of explaining someone coming back. That could fool people, right?
Yeah.
That would fool me in that scenario. So knowing that this is possible, I don't even think someone coming back from the dead would be convincing enough for me.
Okay.
It's something I haven't explained yet. Like I've had
Yeah.
times when I feel like a dream I've had is coming true, and my reaction to that is, oh, that chemical in the brain that squirts when you remember something is squirting at the wrong time now. I don't think that I can see the future or dream the future. I just know that my brain is mis-squirting the chemical and making me believe that. Like, there's probably very little that would make me lean towards magic rather than a rational explanation, if you know what I mean.
I think so too. I think that's a great point, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because when it comes to miracles, right, at least ones that we personally experience, that's also going to be to your own detriment, because unless you have other people in on that experience, the thing is, people have suffered from delusions. It happens every day. It happens all the time, even in younger, healthier people, right? Like, it can still happen. So somebody just saying, hey, this thing happened to me, that's still not going to be enough, at least for me, right? I think it has to be something that could at least be somewhat verified through some other process than just, well, I saw it happen, right? Like, people say, well, why does it have to be, well, why do you have to use all these methods? Why does it have to go through science or whatever? And it doesn't even have to be like an article written about it or anything. I'm just talking about like something beyond just a fishtail, right? Which is what a lot of miracles end up being to me, at least, right? Like, oh yeah, that was this big, I don't know. But I think you're right on the money there. If anybody's challenging you about this kind of stuff, I would just say, look, there's lots of ways it could happen, right? There's a whole book of stuff that I think could happen, but doesn't happen to me. And I would just point to that. But Heath, I do want to plug something real quick, since the crew brought it up. For those who've been listening to the show and maybe have been struggling with their own beliefs, particularly with hell beliefs, we do often partner with an organization called Recovering from Religion, that has some great resources on their website, and also has some folks that you can talk to on the phone about what you're going through. So just a quick plug for folks who want to have some of those resources. But for now, Heath, I am going to go ahead and let you go. Any last words you wanted to shout out before you sign off today?
I would like to plug the Philip K. Dick book, Maze of Death, which is a book where people figure out the frequency to broadcast on to actually have their prayers answered. And it's just a fascinating book about what if you could like pray into a radio and actually get them answered. And it's Philip K. Dick, so you can't go wrong. So Maze of Death, check it out.
Philip K. Dick. Yeah. I hear that guy writes some good stories. Here he's got a few bangers, that Philip K. Dick. But anyway,